In this video, we will finalize the sculpting to go over to the retopology stage by merging all the different body parts and closing the eyes. So first of all, as you remember, we still have this keyframe, and let's have a final look at the keyframed version. Of course, down here, this looks a bit ugly, but this won't be visible when we merge everything. But I think this looks good, especially we have to look at the feet here. I think this looks good, and everything else also. Okay, because now after joining everything, the pose on the second keyframe won't be available anymore because we keyframed all the separate body parts. And also from now on, I think we don't need this overlay anymore. So let's also switch to the image editor. Up here, let's pick the cute creature front back, and then we can have one from the back view and one from the front view, which can be useful later on for adding all the details. Then let's also hide the reference collection. We don't need it right now. And then in this case, I want to use the voxel remesher to merge everything. This of course can alter all the details we added already a bit, but I think in this case, since everything is pretty smooth anyway, it will be appropriate for this sculpting here. The other method would be to use the Boolean modifier to merge every body part step by step, but the voxel remesher is also much faster. So first of all, let's select all the parts here, press Ctrl A and click on Visual Geometry to Mesh so that we make sure that all the modifiers are applied, and then press Ctrl J to join everything. Let's switch over to sculpt mode, and since all the parts are not really merged into each other, we have these facets and they indeed can be useful. So what we can do before we do the remeshing, we can preserve the facets. And as you maybe remember, we already remeshed every body part with this 0.003 meters voxel size. However, since we are now doing again a remesh to merge everything, I would go a tiny bit lower, maybe 0.0025 to preserve all the details here. Then facets is enabled, and then let's click on remesh. And now you can see we have all the facets here still, which might be interesting and useful. So let's just leave them for now. However, for now, let's smooth out the transitions here. Also down here. And for this part, I would go up here to the viewport overlays and disable the facets so we can see the geometry a bit better. And here maybe let's even enable cavity. And in this case, I use the world cavity. So we have this highlight on the sharp edges and the shadow in the valleys and creases. So we can read the shape of this creature a bit better. At this stage, we could go even into object mode, right click and click on Shade Smooth, since we have a relatively high resolution already, and then we can better see how the final result will look like. Let's smooth out some of these parts here. Here on the leg, this line here where the lower leg and the upper leg meet each other should be sharper. Under stroke, let's disable the stabilize stroke, which is still enabled for this brush. Let's make this sharp using the crease brush, and the other side here should be relatively smooth. Let's remove some of the geometry over here. Let's also remove some of the geometry here and here as well. Feels too thick still. And here, luckily, X symmetry is enabled. Of course, now we need the symmetry feature because we don't have any mirror modifier left. So yeah, let's go in here and clean this up a bit more. Now with everything merged, it is much easier to see if everything fits nicely together. So let's merge this here a bit better. And also the arms and the shoulders here. Also here we can connect this with the breasts. Let's use a crease brush here to add a bit of line in between. Also actually this part here should be more connected to the breasts. So let's clean this up a bit, connect this one here more. And with a draw brush, let's add the whole a bit more to the front here. Something like this. So then the horns, as you can see over here, are pretty smoothly merged into the body except this skin thing here. So up here, let's add a bit of geometry to make it a nice smooth transition. Yeah, I think this already looks quite nice. And now let's close the eyes. And this is actually pretty simple. Let's pick the eyes. Let's hit Shift D to duplicate this, right click or escape to reset this to the original position. Press S to scale it up a bit. So these will be the eyelids. And if we make them a bit bigger than the eyes, this mesh of course will cover the eyes. So we still have the eyes down here. Let's use X-ray to see how big this is so that we don't overdo it. Something like this. Disable X-ray, press R twice for the rotation, and then let's just randomly rotate this so that we can't see the iris and the pupil. And now, first of all, apply the visual geometry and the scale, and then join this to the body here. And in this case, since I now sculpted on the entire mesh, I don't want to lose any of these details. I use the Boolean operation. Let's press N, go to Edit, and let's use the Bool tool add-on, which I enabled in the preferences. And let's click on Auto Boolean Union. Now, as you can see, this is nicely merged. Let's switch over to sculpt mode. And if we have a look over here, one thing we have to ask ourselves is how this creature is closing the eyes. Let's use the annotate tool over here. And I think here and here, this should be like the point where we are separating the upper eyelid and the lower eyelid. So this one here is the lower, I think, and this one up here is the upper eyelid. So here on the creature or on the sculpting, maybe let's pull this back a tiny bit. So I guess it will be something from here till somewhere here, something like this. Let's carefully smooth out this part a bit, but I want to keep it relatively sharp. And same over here or down here. Let's add a little bit geometry on top here. But again, most of the details here we will add in the final stage after retopology. Now, if you ask yourself, okay, why do we sculpt the eyes closed? Thing is, when we later on want to make this little creature blink and we sculpted the eyes open, we have only a very little geometry which we then have to stretch across the entire eye. And if you're using textures and stuff like this can look really weird and stretched. And that's why we are sculpting the eyes closed, and then we have enough geometry to move up and down, because when the eyes are open, then everything is pushed up here and pushed pretty close together, and this we can't really notice, but then we still have all the details we need. And maybe we can go a little bit higher here with a sharp line. Something like this should do the job. Over here, let's switch to the erase brush and remove the annotation. Yeah. The eyelids down here are not so beautiful, but yeah, as mentioned, this we will fix later on in the final detailing stage. And let's have a final look here. I think the upper arm and the lower arm still need a little fix here. Let's smooth this out a bit more. Let's highlight the elbow a bit more. Yeah, something like this. And I think we are done with sculpting this little creature. Make sure that in sculpt mode we re-enable the face sets so that we can see them. I'm not sure if we ever will use them, but yeah, just in case we have them here if we want to isolate some of these parts. Anyway, this should it be for this chapter, and we are pretty far with the sculpting already. Now we are only missing the details. And before we add these, let's discover retopology in the next chapter.